I'm Brigantia Blackbird of Blackbird's Brew, and we need to talk. All of us. Pagans, Christians, atheists. If you're an American, we need to talk. All Americans as a whole. It is time for us to clear the air on a few points. Last week, a rather peculiar individual by the name of Emily Kors came out of the woodwork. It was in her capacity as the foreman of a grand jury. It was convened in this court case against President Trump, and it's all very messy and all that. But her mannerisms when she was being interviewed, it gave rise to the suspicion that she's not entirely well, which I completely agree with. Something is wrong with the girl, and she needs to have that addressed. She also seems to be struggling with an observable lack of maturity, a lack of seriousness, as well as really poor communication skills, which are all too common in this day and age. But that's not where the story ended. Oh no. Apparently, this individual has a variety of posts on social media that indicates she has an interest in paganism, Wicca, witchcraft, as well as Harry Potter and other fandoms. And that is when the people of the not Marxist sphere of politics, current events, and social commentary started opening their mouths and sharing their thoughts about what this all means. Now, the problem, one of them, is that people's remarks were rooted in inaccuracies. It was the usual mix of Hollywood nonsense and the stale, centuries-old propaganda that the church circulated literally eons ago when they were doing their very best to discredit different belief systems and anyone who wasn't towing their line. And it was all about controlling people, using the so-called authority of God to justify the decrees of the church and of the Christian monarchs. It was always about control. But I have noticed that when monotheists speak of non-Abrahamic religions such as Hinduism, Buddhism, even Shintoism and Native American beliefs, it tends to have a different tone than when monotheists speak of pagans and witchcraft. Somehow, it has been possible for members of Abrahamic faiths to accept that Hindus, Buddhists, Shintos, Native American practitioners, that they're just simply individuals who practice a different religion with which they have some disagreements. And seldom have I encountered emotionally charged condemnation of such belief systems or describing the people who practice them as evil with malicious intentions. Now, isn't it funny how it's a different matter altogether when pagans and witches are brought into the conversation? Now, before we get into this, let me make it clear that I don't think that all practitioners of Abrahamic monotheistic religions hold all pagans and all witches in disdain. Some people are enlightened enough to view us as just people with whom they have theological disagreements, and they don't get into a tizzy with it, and full credit to them. In fact, one of the moderators of my gilded group, Blackbird's Brew, is a Puritan Christian. If you follow this channel and the channel Wiccan Conservative, you will know her as Puritan View or Amanda, and she's been invited on many occasions to join in conversations regarding cultural and political issues, and she's a valued contributor to all that. Amanda is a bridge builder, and she looks to join in common cause to restore American culture and the Constitution to a state of health. She looks for common ground with us and honestly with everyone, and she doesn't have to sacrifice her own spiritual identity to do it, so clearly it can be done. Now, this may come as a surprise to some, but pagan and Abrahamic religions do have common ground when it comes to shared American values. I have lost count of the number of videos in which myself and other pagans have made that point very, very clear. And I'm really not sure what needs to be said or what needs to be done or what has to happen in order to make that point clear to everyone and universally understood. But we're not there yet, so allow me to briefly outline just a few points of the case once again. First, self-determination. Individuals must have their proper liberty, and they must take personal responsibility for the results of their choices. To do otherwise is just to surrender to the capricious whims of a dictator or to dictatorial institutions. Number 2, reap the benefits of your work. If you planted the field, you should be one getting the benefit of the crops. If you built a business, then the money earned from that business should be a reward for you, as well as the people who operate the business in the form of their proper wages. 3, freedom of expression. It's not the place of the state to regulate what people have to say. Anytime you're holding back, when it comes to that kind of self-abridgment of speech, that should really come from the realm of etiquette, as well as the realm of self-interest. You want to present your arguments in a manner that will make your audience more willing to entertain your ideas. It should be in the spirit of demonstrating verbal goodwill rather than censoring in a really hideous way. 4. Freedom of religion. No one can or should be master over another person's conscience, provided that someone is not using their beliefs as a justification to seize property, or to inflict injury, or worse, or to use it as a form of conquest. As long as that's not the case, people must be left alone to worship in accordance with the dictates of their conscience and the requirements of whatever god or gods happen to be worshipped. And 5, limited governmental authority and division of powers. The very concept of republics, democratic processes, and separation or delegation of state power, that has its root in pagan societies. We can thank the Greco-Roman and Teutonic peoples in particular for those first experiments. And the very nature of pagan spirituality promotes a mindset in which limitations for authority are pretty normal. Every god and goddess has certain matters under their sphere of influence and direction. And these things reflect their priorities, their talents, and their interests. And they don't go around meddling with the business belonging to other deities, not unless they're really looking for trouble. Now, if only the branches of the federal government, states governments, local governments, if only they would follow that example, stay in their lanes, and subject themselves to constitutional limits, what a different world we'd be living in. How many problems would just not really exist in our society, or would be on such a small scale that we would not feel overwhelmed when attempting to address them? Now, these are just 5 points of commonality. I could go on, but I think these 5 make the point pretty adequately. These are principles that allow people of whatever religion or non-religion to coexist with a minimum of fuss and bother. Just respect the rights of others, go about your business, and behave with a reasonable amount of decorum. It's not complicated. And in fact, the simplicity of the Constitution and the values it represents is one of its greatest virtues. It's understandable, straightforward, manageable. The evils of our society are not about a difference of theology. It's due to the cancer of Marxism. The current incarnation of Marxism is what I call the Church of Woke, and it corrupts everything that it touches because that's the only thing its ideas are able to do. And lately I've listened to many Christian commentators who are absolutely livid about the way that this corrosive Marxist ideology has been changing their churches. It's a matter of serious concern about how to best address that and rectify the situation. I sympathize with them, and I agree that that's something that should be rooted out, because the horrid permutations of Marxism and its ideologies, the things that's changing the complexion of the Christian churches, it also had its little fun with the beginnings of the pagan revival in the mid-20th century, and it hasn't helped any of us. Now, when you think about how Marxism sells itself, at least in the beginning stages, you can see why it takes root. Because you just approach people who feel ostracized in some fashion. Tell them you understand. You care. And all you want to do is build a system in which they can be accepted as valued equals. And certainly in the mid-20th century, pagans did endure considerable discrimination and disrespect, so the ground was ripe for this kind of thing to happen. But thankfully, there were pagans who recognized that Marxism, in any form, is wholly incompatible and contradictory of pagan values. And pagans who were in that generation, some of them have devoted their lives to ridding our community of the Marxist corruption. And they've been speaking out and they've been educating about genuine pagan principles. One of the members of Blackbird's Brew, a gentleman by the name of Gandalf Freyasson, he's been part of that fight from the beginning. He and his wife are editors of the True North EuroFaith newsletter, where they write, they share articles written by other people, videos, poetry, art, anything that celebrates and advocates for genuine paganism and pushes back against the cancer of Marxism. And in my own generation, my Georgia Liberty at the channel Wiccan Conservative, my frequent co-host, also a moderator on Blackbird's Brew Ungilded, she's taken up this fight, and she bases all of her content on standing up for constitutional law and values, explaining why these things are perfectly compatible with paganism. Gandalf, Georgia, and I are not the only ones speaking out. We've been doing outreach in our own ways to connect with like-minded pagans, letting them know that they're not alone. They are not crazy in their political convictions, and that we do deserve a place within the Republic, should we be successful in helping restore it. So you see, Christians, we're right there in the fight with you. Now, should the length of this work outstrip our lifetimes, which it might, then the hope is that the members of the younger generation will pick up their torch in their turn and do their part. That's our responsibility as American citizens, all American citizens. And in paganism, it is a tradition of pagan peoples to defend their homes and their tribe with everything that they've got. America is our home. Other Americans are our tribe, and we do what we can to defend both as a matter of duty. The same duty that all Americans of every faith share, but it is a duty that sadly many people have abandoned. So my question to those who looked at the clips of Emily Kors and concluded that her behavior indicates that pagans and witches are anti-American workers of evil, my question to you is this: who is more dangerous to you? Marxists who share the same religious label, or pagans who disagree with you theologically but are absolute sticklers for the Constitution? Pick your poison. American commonality is not based upon ethnic background or religious persuasion. The linchpin is philosophical principles as expressed in such documents as the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Federalist Papers. That's where we can all come together. Otherwise, we have nothing. Just sectarian division that gets progressively more hostile and dangerous for all parties involved. So now is the time to embrace those who embrace the Constitution and to worry a lot less about to whom people are praying. Now, if someone is going to criticize paganism, witchcraft, Wicca, then have the manners to do so with accurate knowledge. Get it right. I'm going to provide a few brief definitions about what these things actually are, because clearly there's misrepresentation out there. And then I'm going to briefly outline the core beliefs of Wicca, because the social media posts of Emily Kors has brought such things into the public conversation, and clearly the message that so many of us have been trying to get out hasn't gotten through to everyone just yet. So, to begin with, paganism is not the same thing as New Age spirituality. New Age spirituality cherry picks things from all religions, philosophies, adds in a hefty dose of pop psychology, whirls it all around in a blender, and then spews out empty platitudes and bromides. It does not seek to ground itself in reality. Its desire is to reshape reality to conform to one's preferences and feelings. It is wholly subjective, and it's little wonder that the New Agers are overwhelmingly leftists. But make no mistake, they are not pagan. Paganism, by contrast, is the acceptance of and surrender to reality and natural law. The material and the spiritual are not separate things, but aspects of a whole. The goal is not to escape the material world, to have some blissful existence in some other dimension in non-corporeal form for all of eternity. That's not what we're about. The cycle of life, death, and rebirth, that is also the cycles of the stages of matter, that is the human spirit. The goal of pagan spirituality, therefore, is full integration within one's soul, as a member of the community, between oneself and the natural world, between oneself and the gods. And the gods are not merely lords over aspects of nature or certain parts of existence. They are also the progenitors of human peoples. And whether one chooses to see this bond as literal or figurative or some combination of both, it remains that the human connection to the gods is more than bone deep. It is woven into our very souls. So the task of a pagan is to find, create, and enact one's place in the world, learn all that one can, and use that knowledge and experience, as well as pagan lore and wisdom, to become a better person, which consequently betters the world as a whole. Now, not all pagans practice magic or witchcraft. That is a role that is in addition to being pagan. It is not a requirement, nor does every individual have the capacity to become a fully fledged magical practitioner. Magic is a natural force that can be harnessed and used to create specific effects, much like electricity can. But unlike electricity, science has yet to quantify magic. Now, the inability of science to explain something does not invalidate that thing's existence. In scientific inquiry, it has revealed a great deal in the past few centuries, but there's still much to learn. And perhaps one day science will learn how to detect magical energies and even begin to understand them, even if that doesn't occur within the lifetime of anyone currently living. So the practice of magic, it falls into three broad categories. We have practical magic, we have witchcraft, we have Wicca. No matter what form of magic is being practiced, the energy is used and directed in a manner consistent with natural law. There is a scientific explanation for it, even if we don't have that explanation at present. Practical magic is utilizing magical energies to create effects wholly outside a religious or spiritual context. It is purely a tool, a means to achieve an end. Witchcraft is inherently spiritual. One common saying is that witches walk with a foot on both sides of the veil, that is between the seen and the unseen world. It's tapping into manifested and unmanifested energies for the purposes of learning, spiritual enlightenment, and for practical effect. Things like astrology, divination, crystal work, herbal lore, animal spirits, various methodologies of spells and rituals, among other things, these comprise the disciplines within the umbrella of witchcraft, just like different fields of science, biology, astronomy, as physics, just as examples. Those all fall under the whole umbrella of science. Now, different witches may choose to specialize in certain disciplines depending upon their natural aptitudes and interests and needs. But unlike the practical magicians, witches go about their work with the knowledge and the intention of it affecting all areas of life. It is a holistic approach, the material and the spiritual. Now, Wicca and other forms of religious witchcraft is a path of priesthood. Wicca studies all the things that witchcraft does. It does all the things that witchcraft does, but it adds another layer of responsibility to the mix, and that is to act in a priestly role and to be actively of service to the pagan community as the need arises. And while not all witches are Wiccan, every Wiccan is a witch. If someone claims to be Wiccan, but they do not practice the craft, then that person has improperly labeled themselves. If a person has broadly pagan beliefs, then they can be called pagan. That's honest. But Wiccan and witch are roles that have a much more specific meaning. So let's briefly talk about just a few of the core concepts of Wicca. The first is that divinity has masculine and feminine aspects and manifestations, primarily as the god and the goddess. The second is that the god is symbolized by the sun, and his mythological journey represents the corporeal cycle of our lives. 3, the goddess is symbolized by the moon, and her mythological journey represents the eternal and renewing aspect of our souls. 4th, magical energies can be categorized as 5 elements: air representing thought, fire representing will, water representing emotion, earth representing the material, and spirit representing divinity. Successful spells and rituals call upon these energies, programs them, and then releases them into the universe to manifest. 5thly, the Wheel of the Year is a cycle of holy days that mark significant times in the agricultural year and also symbolize the stages of corporeal life. 6th, we have moon rituals, specifically during the new moon and the full moon. These are performed during times of naturally heightened energy in order to improve the odds of successful spell work. 7th, we have a promotion of balance and harmony between the masculine and the feminine, a promotion of high ethical standards, and a promotion of pagan virtues. 8thly, we have a sense of the need for good stewardship over ourselves, over our relationships, be they romantic, familial, platonic, or just acquaintanceship in a community. And we also need to have good stewardship over our environment. 9th, we have the exploration of spiritual mysteries, of putting one's learning into practice for the benefit of oneself and one's spiritual community. And 10th, we have an awareness of the ever-presence of magical energies, and we utilize them as a way of life. And that just scratches the surface. There's a lot more to it. But I hope the point is made, and I hope it's obvious by now that paganism, witchcraft, and Wicca are not anti-American. Clearly, all the things we've talked about, the principles mentioned, it represents the values of hard work. We value justice, we value liberty, and we value sound ethical standards. Nature is objective reality, and we seek the wisdom of the gods, our ancestors, and our peers to better live within the natural laws to which all of existence is subject. We are not out to get anyone. We're not interested in destroying other people's faith. We merely stand upon our right to practice our own in peace. The LARPers out there, the Marxists, they do not represent us, nor do the prejudices of past centuries and modern media define us. The country needs all the patriots it can get, and seeking to divide loyalties down religious lines is counterproductive, and it makes life easier for anti-American ideologies and people. And I don't believe in doing your enemies any favors. So in view of that, now is really not the time to get fussy about political allies. We just do not have the time for it. We've got a country to save, and it's past time to get down to business. So what say you, monotheists? Are you ready to roll up your sleeves? Or will you fall to the divide and conquer tactic of the Marxists? It's time for you to decide. I have said what I have to say on this topic. If you agree with anything that I've had to say, please spread this video far and wide. Clearly, the message has not gotten through to the mainstream just yet, so we've got to do what we can to correct that situation, and I appreciate any help you give me in that particular endeavor. So if you would like to carry on this conversation, please click on the link below to take you to our community and Gilded. Our server is called Blackbird's Brew, and if you would like to connect with like-minded pagans and patriots, we are ready to welcome you with open arms. But that does it for now. I will see you next time. Bye.